The Grand Hall of Prime was filled with hundreds of aliens from across the galaxy. Lights of every color floated near the ceiling. Music played softly from somewhere unseen. Diplomats and nobles from 12 different species walked between tables covered in strange foods and drinks. Daniel Cole stood near the back wall. He was a human security officer, 34 years old, and his job tonight was simple: protect Ambassador Lane, watch for threats, stay quiet. His armor covered him from neck to feet. It was dark gray metal with black joints. Compared to the flowing robes and energy shields worn by the aliens around him, he looked like a machine. A few passing diplomats glanced at him with amusement. One made a sound that might have been laughter. Daniel did not react. He had been trained not to react. Ambassador Lane stood a few feet away, talking with a group of tall beings with blue skin and long fingers. She was good at her job. She smiled at the right times and asked the right questions. Humans had only been part of the Galactic Coalition for 15 years. They were still new, still proving themselves. The Unity Summit happened once every year. It was supposed to strengthen friendships between species. In truth, it was also a place where the powerful showed off their power and the weak tried not to be noticed. Humans were somewhere in between, too new to be respected, too strange to be ignored. Daniel watched the crowd carefully. His eyes moved from face to face, looking for anything unusual. Most of the aliens paid no attention to him. He was just another guard, just another human in ugly armor. Then he saw her. It was hard to miss. She stood 7 feet tall with silver skin that seemed to glow under the lights. She had 4 arms, each one moving with smooth grace as she spoke to the beings around her. Her eyes were pale gold, and when she smiled, her teeth were sharp and white. She was a noble of the Dominion, one of the oldest and most powerful species in the Coalition. Everyone knew her name. Everyone knew her sharp tongue. Finished her conversation and began walking through the crowd. Her golden eyes swept across the room until they landed on Daniel. She changed direction and walked straight toward him. Daniel kept his face calm. He had dealt with curious aliens before. Most of them just wanted to look at his armor or ask questions about Earth. It was annoying but harmless. Stopped in front of him. She was so tall that Daniel had to look up to meet her eyes. Her 4 arms folded across her chest as she studied him. "So this is a human soldier," she said. Her voice was loud enough for the nearby aliens to hear. Several of them turned to watch. Daniel said nothing. Walked in a slow circle around him. Her golden eyes examined every part of his armor. When she returned to face him, she was smiling. "Tell me, human," she said, "is this armor the best your species can make? It looks like something from a primitive age. Heavy metal plates bolted together like a cage." A few aliens nearby made sounds of amusement. "It serves its purpose," Daniel said quietly. "Its purpose?" Laughed. The sound was musical but cruel. "What purpose could it possibly serve? To make you slower, to make you weaker? They stopped using such things 1,000 years ago." More aliens gathered to watch. Daniel could feel their eyes on him. He kept his breathing steady. Ambassador Lane noticed the crowd forming and began walking toward them. Her face was carefully neutral, but Daniel could see the worry in her eyes. Noticed her approaching and smiled wider. "Ah, the human ambassador. Perhaps you can explain to me why your guards wear these metal coffins." Lane smiled politely. "The armor is standard equipment for human security personnel. It has proven effective in many situations." "Effective?" raised one eyebrow. "Against what? A strong wind, a thrown stone." The aliens around them laughed openly now. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would only make things worse. Turned back to Daniel. She leaned down until her face was close to his. "Tell me, little human, is your armor so heavy that you cannot even bow to your betters? Is that why you stand there like a statue?" Daniel met her golden eyes. He did not look away. "The armor is not for my protection," he said. Blinked, for a moment her smile flickered. "Not for your protection." She straightened up and looked at the crowd with exaggerated confusion. "Then what is it for? Decoration? A fashion choice?" The aliens laughed again. Daniel did not answer. He simply stood there, his face calm, his eyes steady. Waited for him to speak. When he did not, something shifted in her expression. The mockery was still there, but beneath it was something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or irritation. "Very mysterious," she said finally. "The silent human in his metal box, how impressive." She turned and walked away. The crowd began to break apart, returning to their conversations and drinks. A few aliens gave Daniel pitying looks as they passed. Ambassador Lane stepped close to him. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "You handled that well, better than most would have." Daniel said nothing. He returned to watching the crowd. But in his mind he replayed question. What is the armor for? He had not lied. The armor was not for his protection. But the truth was something these aliens were not ready to hear. Not yet. The night continued. The music played. The diplomats talked and laughed and made deals in quiet corners. And Daniel Cole stood in his armor and waited. The second day of the summit began with whispers. Daniel Cole had expected it. News traveled fast among diplomats. By morning, everyone seemed to know about the human guard who had been mocked by. Most found it funny. A few seemed curious. He stood in his usual place behind Ambassador Lane, watching the crowds move through the smaller meeting rooms. Today was for private negotiations. Small groups gathered in corners, speaking in low voices about trade and territory and old disagreements. A tall figure approached them. Daniel recognized him immediately. Commander was a species of reptilian warriors known throughout the galaxy. His scales were dark green, almost black, and his yellow eyes were sharp and focused. He walked with the careful movements of someone who had spent years in combat. "Ambassador Lane," he said, his voice was deep and rough. "May I speak with you privately?" Lane looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Of course, Commander." They moved to a quiet alcove near the windows. Daniel followed at a respectful distance, close enough to protect but far enough to give them privacy. Glanced at Daniel, then back to Lane. "I heard about what happened last night, and her games." "It was nothing," Lane said calmly. "Just words." "It was not nothing," shook his head slowly. "Is powerful. Her family has controlled the trade routes for centuries. When she speaks, others listen. Her mockery of your guard could damage Earth standing here." Lane's expression remained neutral. "I appreciate your concern, Commander, but I must ask, why do you care what happens to humanity?" Was quiet for a moment. His yellow eyes looked past Lane, focusing on something far away. 3 years ago," he said finally, "the Frontier War. My unit was trapped behind enemy lines on a moon called Seven. We had 40 soldiers. By the end of the first day, we had 19. Lane listened without interrupting. "We sent a distress signal, but no one was close enough to help. No one except a small ship carrying a team of human marines, 12 of them." Paused. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "They came for us. They did not have to. We were not their people. But they came anyway. They held a defensive position for 18 hours while we evacuated our wounded. 18 hours against an enemy that outnumbered them 5-1. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He knew stories like this. He had lived through some of them. "By the end," continued, "only 4 humans were still standing, but they were still fighting. I saw one of them take a wound that would have killed any. A piece of metal went through his side, through organs that should have been vital. He pulled it out. He kept shooting." Lane's face showed nothing, but her hands were very still. "I asked him later how he survived," said. "He told me that human bodies are built differently. He said they break and they heal, over and over again. He said that dying was harder than it looked. Looked at Daniel now. His yellow eyes held something like respect. Most species do not understand what humans are, he said. They see the armor and think it hides weakness. They do not know what it really hides. Lane nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me this, Commander. Gave a small bow of his head. Be careful with. She enjoys making enemies, but she does not yet know what kind of enemy a human can be. He turned and walked away, his dark scales catching the light. Lane looked at Daniel. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The day continued. More meetings, more careful words and political games. During a break in the afternoon, Daniel found himself alone in a quiet hallway. He stood near a window, looking out at the alien city below. Strange buildings rose toward a purple sky. Ships flew between them like metal birds. A voice spoke from behind him. You look like you are thinking deep thoughts. Daniel turned. A woman stood a few feet away. She was shorter than, with darker silver skin and kind eyes. She wore the simple robes of an advisor rather than the rich fabrics of a noble. I am Counselor Myra Thane, she said. I wanted to apologize for what happened last night. Does not speak for all of us. Daniel studied her for a moment. She seemed sincere. Thank you, he said. Myra stepped closer to the window, looking out at the city beside him. I have always been curious about humans. Your species is so new to the coalition, yet you have already made such an impact. We try to be useful. More than useful, Myra smiled slightly. Tell me about your world, Earth. What is it like? Daniel thought about how to answer. Most aliens expected simple descriptions, pretty landscapes and pleasant weather. Earth is dangerous, he said. Myra looked surprised. Dangerous, how so? We have predators that can kill an adult human in seconds. We have diseases that have wiped out millions. Our weather can create storms that destroy entire cities. Parts of our planet are so hot that skin burns. Other parts are so cold that blood freezes. Myra's eyes widened. And humans survive all of this. We adapted. We learned to fight. We learned to heal. We learned that giving up was not an option. Myra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. I think I understand now why you seem so different from other species. Before Daniel could respond, a loud voice echoed through the hallway. Attention, honored delegates. It was. She stood at the far end of the hall, surrounded by other nobles. Her golden eyes swept across the crowd. Tomorrow evening, we will hold a ceremonial demonstration of combat prowess. Champions from each species are invited to participate, a chance to show the strength and skill of your people. She turned her gaze toward Daniel. Her smile was sharp. I especially invite the human guard to join us. Perhaps he can show everyone what that impressive armor is truly capable of. Ambassador Lane appeared at Daniel's side. Her face was tight with concern. She began to speak, to refuse politely. But Daniel spoke first. I accept. The words echoed in the sudden silence. Smile flickered for just a moment. Then it returned, wider than before. Excellent, tomorrow then. She turned and walked away, her silver skin glowing under the lights. Ambassador Lane looked at Daniel. What are you doing? Daniel watched disappear into the crowd. Accepting an invitation, he said quietly. And for the first time in 2 days, he felt something like anticipation. The night before the demonstration was quiet. Daniel Cole stood alone in the human delegation's quarters, looking out the window at the alien stars. They were different from the stars he had grown up watching on Earth. Different colors, different patterns, but they were still beautiful. The door behind him opened. We need to talk. Ambassador Lane walked into the room. She had removed her formal robes and wore simple clothes now. Her face showed the tiredness she had hidden all day. Ma'am, Daniel said. Do not call me ma'am right now. Lane sat down in a chair and rubbed her eyes. Right now, I am just a worried woman asking a soldier what he is planning to do. Daniel turned from the window. I plan to participate in the demonstration. I gathered that. Lane looked up at him. What I want to know is why is setting a trap. She wants to embarrass you, to embarrass all of humanity. I know. Then why accept? We could have refused politely, made some excuse about diplomatic protocol. No one would have blamed us. Daniel was quiet for a moment. He walked across the room and sat down across from her. Do you know why she mocked me? He asked. Lane frowned. Because she is cruel, because she enjoys feeling superior. That is part of it, but the real reason is simpler. Daniel leaned forward. She does not know what we are. None of them do. They see the armor and they think they understand. They think we are weak creatures hiding inside metal shells. And you want to correct that understanding. I want to show them the truth. Lane studied his face. She had worked with many soldiers over the years. She knew how to read them, but Daniel Cole was harder to read than most. What exactly are you planning to do tomorrow? She asked. Daniel did not answer right away. Instead, he reached down and began removing his gauntlet. The metal pieces clicked softly as he pulled them apart. Lane watched with confusion. Daniel. He set the gauntlet aside. His hand was bare now, and Lane could not stop herself from staring. His hand was covered in scars. Thick white lines crossed his knuckles. Old burns marked his palm. His fingers were rough with calluses that looked almost like armor themselves. My God, Lane whispered. This is what we hide, Daniel said quietly. This is what the armor covers. He turned his hand over slowly, letting her see every mark. Every scar was a story. A fight survived. A wound that should have killed him but did not. Every human who serves in security or military roles wears full coverage armor in diplomatic settings, Daniel explained. It is protocol, standard procedure for all contact with other species. Why, I never knew about this. Because human bodies disturb other species. Daniel met her eyes. We do not heal clean like they do. We scar. We break and reform. Our skin tells the story of every injury we have ever survived, and that story makes aliens uncomfortable. Lane looked at his hand again. She thought about all the times she had seen human soldiers and guards in their armor. She had never questioned it, never wondered what was underneath. The heal without marks, Daniel continued. The regenerate lost limbs. Most species either heal perfectly or die. They do not understand what it means to carry your wounds with you forever. And you plan to show them tomorrow. Daniel nodded slowly, asked what the armor was for. Tomorrow I will give her an answer. Lane was quiet for a long time. She looked at Daniel's hand, then at his face. He was calm, certain. This was not a decision made in anger. What will they see, she asked finally, when you remove the armor? Daniel began putting his gauntlet back on, covering his hand once more. My father was a construction worker, he said. He fell from a building when I was 12, broke his back. The doctors said he would never walk again. 3 years later, he ran a marathon. Lane listened without speaking. My mother had cancer twice. Both times they told her she had months to live. She died at 87 in her sleep, still complaining that the hospital food was terrible. A small smile crossed Lane's face despite herself. I have been shot 4 times, Daniel continued. Stabbed twice. I fell off a cliff during training and broke 11 bones. I caught a fever on my first deployment that should have killed me in 2 days. That was 9 years ago. He finished attaching his gauntlet and stood up. Humans do not survive because we are strong. We survive because we refuse to stop. Our bodies break and heal until the breaking stops working. And even then we keep trying. Lane stood up too. She stepped closer to him. If you do this, there is no going back. Every species in the coalition will know what humans really are. Yes, they might fear us, they might hate us, they might see us as monsters. Daniel nodded. They might, or they might finally respect us. Lane looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and put her hand on his armored shoulder. I have been a diplomat for 30 years, she said. I have negotiated treaties and ended conflicts and saved lives with words. But sometimes words are not enough. Sometimes people need to see the truth with their own eyes. She stepped back. Do what you need to do tomorrow, Daniel. Show them what we are. Daniel gave a small nod. Thank you, Ambassador. Lane walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned back. For what it is worth, I am proud to have you representing humanity. Then she was gone. Daniel turned back to the window. The alien stars still burned in the darkness. Tomorrow, everything would change. He looked down at his armored hand. Beneath the metal, he could feel the old scars pressing against the padding. Every mark was a memory. Every wound was a lesson. Survival was never pretty, but it was human. And tomorrow, the galaxy would finally understand. The arena was filled with hundreds of watching eyes. Daniel Cole stood at the edge of the demonstration floor, looking out at the gathered diplomats and nobles. They sat in elevated seats that surrounded the circular arena like a bowl. Lights floated overhead, casting everything in a soft golden glow. Champions from 8 different species had gathered to showcase their abilities. A warrior stood nearby, her silver skin gleaming beneath a flowing energy shield. A fighter tested the weight of his ceremonial blade. Others prepared in their own ways, stretching muscles or focusing their minds. Daniel stood still. He did not prepare, he simply waited. Ambassador Lane sat in the human delegation section, her face carefully neutral. Beside her, other Earth diplomats watched with obvious nervousness. They knew something was going to happen. They just did not know what. Presided over the event from a raised platform. She wore robes of deep purple that flowed around her forearms like water. Her golden eyes swept across the arena with obvious pleasure. Welcome, honored guests. Her voice carried easily through the hall. Today we celebrate the strength and skill of our coalition. Each champion will demonstrate the finest qualities of their species. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. The demonstrations began. The champion moved first, her body flowing through a series of combat forms that seemed more like dancing. Her energy shield pulsed and shifted, blocking simulated attacks from floating drones. The crowd applauded warmly. Next came the Commander's champion was a massive warrior with scars across his snout. He moved with brutal efficiency, his blade cutting through practiced targets with terrifying speed. The crowd's applause was mixed with murmurs of respect and fear. Other champions followed. A species of beings demonstrated their ability to coordinate as a unit, moving as one. A race of tall, thin beings showed their mental abilities, moving objects without touching them. Then it was Daniel's turn. The arena fell quiet as he walked to the center. He could feel every eye on him. Some were curious. Some were amused. Many were expecting entertainment, a clumsy human stumbling around in his heavy armor. Leaned forward on her platform, her smile sharp and eager. Daniel stopped in the center of the arena. He stood very still. For a long moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched. Someone in the crowd made a sound of impatience. Then Daniel reached up and began removing his armor. He started with his gloves. The metal pieces clicked softly as he pulled them apart and dropped them to the ground. His hands were revealed first, and even from a distance, the audience could see something was wrong. His hands were covered in scars. White lines crossed his knuckles. Old burns marked his palms. His fingers were rough and damaged. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Daniel continued. He removed his arm guards, revealing forearms that told stories of violence. One arm had a long scar running from wrist to elbow, a wound that had clearly cut deep. The other arm showed marks from burns and cuts and something that looked like teeth. The murmurs grew louder. Daniel reached up and released his chest plate. It fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Beneath it, he wore only a thin undershirt, and through the fabric the audience could see more scars. He pulled off the undershirt. The hall went silent. Daniel's torso was a map of survival. A long scar ran across his ribs, thick and ragged, the kind of wound that should have killed him. Smaller scars covered his chest and stomach, some surgical, some from combat. His shoulder showed the unmistakable mark of a bullet wound. His back, as he turned slowly, showed more of the same. Several aliens in the crowd looked away. One diplomat covered their eyes with all four hands. A sound like a moan came from somewhere in the upper seats. Smile was gone. She stared at Daniel with something between horror and disbelief. Her golden eyes were wide. Daniel finished removing his leg armor. Even his legs bore marks. His knees showed surgical scars. His shins had lines from cuts and breaks. He stood in the center of the arena, wearing only shorts and boots now. His entire body was exposed. Every scar, every mark, every wound that had healed wrong or healed rough or simply healed when it should not have healed at all. The silence in the hall was complete. Daniel looked up at the watching crowd. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. "You asked what the armor was for," he said. "It was not for my protection." He turned slowly, letting everyone see the full truth of his body. Humans wear armor in diplomatic settings because our appearance disturbs other species. We do not heal clean like you do. We do not regenerate or reform without marks. Our bodies carry every injury we have ever survived. He stopped turning, his eyes found on her platform. Every human soldier has scars like these. Every human who has lived a full life carries marks from disease and accident and predator. We break and we heal. Break and heal, over and over again until we die. A noble in the front row made a choking sound. The armor was not a coffin, Daniel continued. It was not compensation for weakness. It was a courtesy. We hid ourselves so that you would not have to see what survival really looks like. Commander sat in the section. He nodded slowly, his yellow eyes showing understanding. Counselor Myra Thane pressed her hands to her mouth. Her eyes were wet. Daniel looked around the arena one more time. "You laughed at my armor, you called it primitive. You thought it meant we were fragile." He shook his head slowly. "We are the opposite of fragile. We are what happens when a species refuses to die, when every injury becomes a lesson instead of an ending, when pain becomes just another signal to keep going." He bent down and picked up his chest plate. "Now you know what we hide. Now you know what humans really are." He began putting his armor back on, piece by piece. The hall remained silent. When he finished, he looked exactly as he had before. A human guard in gray metal armor. Nothing special, nothing impressive. But now they knew what was underneath. Daniel walked out of the arena without another word. Behind him, the silence finally broke, but it was not laughter this time. It was something else entirely. The demonstration ended without any combat. No champion stepped forward to challenge Daniel after he left the arena. The warrior who had been so eager to perform looked uncertain. The fighter sheathed his blade without being asked. One by one, the other champions returned to their delegations. Did not speak for a long time. She sat on her platform, her four arms folded tightly against her chest. Her golden eyes stared at the empty center of the arena where Daniel had stood. The crowd began to break apart slowly. Diplomats whispered to each other as they left. Some looked back at the human delegation with new expressions on their faces. Fear, perhaps, or wonder, or something in between. Daniel stood with Ambassador Lane near the exit. He had put all his armor back on. He looked the same as he always had. but everyone who passed him now looked at his armor differently. "That was either the bravest thing I have ever seen," Lane said quietly, "or the most foolish." "Perhaps both," Daniel replied. A figure approached them through the thinning crowd, moved slowly as if each step was difficult. The arrogance that had surrounded her like a shield was gone. She stopped in front of Daniel. For a moment, she simply looked at him. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, nothing like the loud mockery of 2 days ago. Daniel waited. "I did not understand," continued. "I looked at your armor and I saw weakness hiding behind metal. I thought your species was young and soft and easily broken." She paused. "I was wrong." "Yes," Daniel said simply, "you were." His jaw tightened slightly. She was not used to being spoken to so directly, but she did not argue. "How do you survive such damage?" she asked. "I have never seen a body carry so many wounds. Among my people, any one of those injuries would be fatal. We heal perfectly or we die. There is no middle ground." Daniel considered his answer carefully. "Human bodies are designed to endure," he said. "We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. Predators, disease, weather, other humans. We learned that survival is not about avoiding damage. It is about taking damage and continuing anyway." "That sounds like torture," said. "Sometimes it is." Daniel's voice was calm. "But we do not stop. We cannot stop. It is not in our nature." Was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that Daniel knew was coming. "Why did you reveal this today? You could have kept hiding. No one would have known." Daniel met her golden eyes directly. "Because you asked, and because sometimes understanding requires discomfort." Blinked, something flickered across her face. Shame, perhaps, or the beginning of respect. "I have been a fool," she said softly. "Yes," Daniel agreed, "but you are not the first, and you will not be the last." Heavy footsteps announced another arrival. Commander approached, his dark scales catching the light. He stopped beside and looked at her with his sharp yellow eyes. "Now you understand," he said to her. "I tried to tell you years ago after the Frontier War, but you did not listen." Turned to him. "You knew about humans." "I fought beside them. I watched them take wounds that would have killed me twice over and keep fighting. I saw what their bodies carry." Looked at Daniel with respect. "They are not weak creatures hiding in armor. They are survivors from a death world who hide their scars out of kindness." Looked back at Daniel. Her expression had changed completely. The mockery was gone. The cruelty was gone. In its place was something like awe. "I will tell others," she said. "I will make sure everyone knows what I learned today." "Do what you think is right," Daniel replied. Counselor Myra Thane arrived next. Her eyes were still wet, but she was smiling now. "I spoke with several delegations," she told Ambassador Lane. "There is great interest in learning more about humanity. Several species wish to discuss closer cooperation." Lane nodded. "We would welcome that. Your soldiers' demonstration has changed how many see your species. Before today, humans were seen as young and unproven. Now," Myra looked at Daniel, "now they see survivors." More delegations approached as the final hours of the summit passed. Representatives from species that had ignored humans before now came to introduce themselves. Military commanders asked about training programs. Scientists wanted to study human healing abilities. Daniel stood quietly through all of it, letting Ambassador Lane handle the conversations. This was her world, not his. He was just a guard. But he noticed how the aliens looked at him now. They did not see his armor as a joke anymore. They looked at it with understanding. As the summit officially ended, Lane pulled Daniel aside. "You changed everything today," she said. "Years of diplomatic work, and nothing moved the needle as much as you standing in that arena." Daniel shrugged slightly. "Sometimes actions speak louder than words." "They certainly do," Lane smiled. "Earth owes you a debt, Daniel." "I was just doing my job," Lane laughed softly. Of course you were. They walked toward the exit together. The alien city spread out before them, beautiful and strange under the purple sky. Will you keep wearing the armor? Lane asked. Daniel looked down at his armored hands. Beneath the metal, his scars pressed against the padding, marks from a lifetime of survival. Yes, he said, the armor is still a courtesy. We do not need to make everyone uncomfortable all the time. But now they know what it hides. Yes, now they know. They walked out of the summit hall and into the alien world beyond. Ships flew overhead. Strange beings moved through the streets. And for the first time, when those beings saw the human in his gray metal armor, they did not laugh. They looked at him with respect. Daniel Cole had shown them the truth about humanity, not strength measured in weapons or technology, not power counted in ships or soldiers. Just survival, the simple, brutal, beautiful act of refusing to die. And in a galaxy full of species that healed perfectly or died completely, that was the most impressive thing of all.